Today we're going to talk about a few different things, but from perimenopause to menopause to postmenopause, what are these changes that are occurring and why? So, hi, I'm Dr. Lori Marbas. I'm a board certified family and lifestyle medicine physician who specializes in not only lifestyle medicine, but specifically menopause and helping women understand the changes that their body's going through and really understand the data that's coming out and how that can affect you. But first of all, I really like to appreciate all of you and thank you for being here. And so let's dive right in. All right, number one. So, first of all, let me just remind you for those of you who don't know, remember, menopause is a natural biological process that all women, if you live long enough, will absolutely experience, right? But it often brings with it a range of symptoms that can affect both physical and your emotional well being. The journey through perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause is very unique for every woman. I can attest to that. But the challenges are commonly experienced at each stage. So we're going to understand, and that's really important. I want you to understand that knowledge is power, right? So understanding what happens during each of these phases and why can really help you navigate the transitions and then manage your symptoms much, much, much more effectively. All right, so let's start with perimenopause. Like, what happens during perimenopause? So think about perimenopause as this kind of transitional phase that leads up to menopause, right? It typically starts in your 40s. And thinking back in my own life, yeah, absolutely was there. And I first started noticing it with periods being irregular, but also my sleep quality decreased, not to the point that I was concerned or worrisome. I thought, oh, I'm just a light sleeper. But that went on for many years. So just be kind of looking for these subtle changes, right? But sometimes these can actually start happening in your early to mid 30s. So again, it can also last anywhere from a few months to several years. And during that time, the ovaries basically gradually produce less and less estrogen. And then that leads to the irregular menses and then the onset of the various physical and emotional symptoms that you may have. So, what are some of the common symptoms of perimenopause? Well, number one is irregular periods. That's probably the number one hallmark of the perimenopause is this unpredictable cycle, right? Periods might be lighter, heavier, shorter, or longer, and any combination thereof. Yay. Number two, hot flashes and night sweats, right? They're sudden, they're intense, and these really, you just feel like someone turned on the heat. And they're one of the most common symptoms, and one of the most common symptoms that people actually speak about in research. But there's so many more symptoms, at least 35 plus recognized symptoms of menopause that most women don't even know are considered actual menopause symptoms. Again, this can disrupt your daytime activities and your sleep. You also can get these mood swings, right? You get hormonal changes that often lead to increased irritability, anxiety, or even depression that leaves you confused and everyone around you confused, like what's going on. Excuse me. Next is the sleep problems, right? So insomnia and other sleep disturbances can frequently be seen during perimenopause, and then again, often linked to the night sweats. Fatigue, right? So the combination of sleep issues, hormonal fluctuations, and then that results in persistent tiredness. And honestly, you're just, again, the lack of estrogen in and of itself will cause some fatigue. So these things are just compounded. They cause more stress, which causes more issues. So you can see where that cycle spirals down and just can really affect your quality of life. Next would be vaginal dryness. You start to notice decreased estrogen leads to thinning of the vaginal lining, right? So that causes dryness and discomfort, particularly during intercourse. Brain fog. So many women report difficulty concentrating and occasional memory lapses. It's normal. And then weight gain, right? So metabolism tends to slow down. Particularly, you'll start seeing weight gain around the abdomen, making it harder to manage weight. So again, perimenopause is marked by the fluctuating symptoms, and you may have significant discomfort, while others you may notice none or little changes. Again, the unpredictability of it really makes it challenging. So then this leads to menopause, right? So menopause officially begins when a woman has not had a menstrual cycle for 12 months. These are just arbitrary discussions and definitions that the medical establishment has placed so that we can create a consistent pattern of helping women and talking about women, these different things, the quote unquote diagnosis, I guess. But anyway, the average age of menopause is around 51, but it can occur earlier or later. So anywhere I would say between 45 and 55 is quote unquote normal. Again, this is when the ovaries stop releasing eggs and the body produces very little estrogen. So what are those common symptoms? Very similar to the one we talked about, the hot flashes and night sweats, the vaginal dryness and discomfort, but the hot flashes you might see some get much better or significantly worse, but typically you'll see them start to decline over time. But in the very beginning, in the early stages of where the menstrual cycle has stopped, you may notice a real severe intensity. That's actually what happened to me. I get an occasional one. It was like once every few months. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Because usually I was, cold intolerant, but then it became heat intolerant. And then it became very intense heat intolerant. So again, it depends on the woman. Then we have vaginal dryness, right? So that just actually increases as you see this estrogen level decrease. So again, you'll get more discomfort from sexual activity, and you increase the risk of urinary tract infections. Then you also may see increased urinary frequency, urgency, and incontinence. Yeah, I'm just sharing with you the symptoms. There are absolute ways to manage these things, guys, but I want you to be aware of what to expect. Next is bone loss, right? So as estrogen declines, especially during this perimenopause, later perimenopause, early menopause phase, is where you get that accelerated bone loss. So if you already walk into your early 30s or 40s with a deficit of your bone density, because your bone density kind of stops, at least per the research, it seems to stop around the bone bank is not taking any more deposits, basically, by age 30. So then, again, it depends on a variety of things. How was your nutrition? How was your activity as a kid? All these things need to be taken into account. If you don't know that you're dealing with an issue of, already decreased bone density, and then you enter into perimenopause and menopause, well, you're going to be even at a worse outcome if we don't pay attention to this, because now we're losing the one of the hormone drivers that really feeds that bone density. And that's such an important piece. I have all sorts of information regarding osteoporosis and stuff, but I'll get to that later. But right now, again, we just want you to be aware of it. The osteoporosis risk increases, and typically the diagnosis isn't made until there's been a fracture. You certainly should consider getting a DEXA scan just to get the data, right, to see where your bone density is. I find that most women become much more proactive when they understand there's actually something going on inside their body that they weren't aware of, right? This is kind of a silent situation until it's not silent, and then you're in a real pickle. Next, let's talk about the mood and mental health issues, right? So again, these symptoms that we had with perimenopause are just going to persist, and the brain fog actually becomes an issue. Remember, estrogen affects every part of the body, and the brain is no exception. If anything, it's the most thing to be considered, because part of the hot flash and stuff is a brain effect. Again, weight gain, your metabolism slows, your increased risk for decreasing muscle mass, which is your metabolic furnace. All of that seems to accelerate. And then you have post-menopause, right? So this refers to the years following menopause, when estrogen and your progesterone levels remain low. Now, you may have some symptoms that persist, and mood swings also may persist, but most of them start to begin and subside. But there are other long-term health effects that you really should be aware of. Again, heart disease and osteoporosis being one of them. So vaginal dryness and atrophy actually worsens. And what I've seen is that most women in this postmenopausal phase, if they don't do things to actively address it, they may get recurring UTIs, right? So if you're finding that you're going frequently to the bathroom, or you're having recurrent UTIs, maybe speak to your doctor about a topical estradiol, and it's safe for 99% of the women. Of course, if you had a history of a hormone or an estrogen positive or cancer, you'll definitely want to speak to your oncologist and make sure that that's appropriate for you. But it is absolutely something to consider and speak to someone, This is a type of estrogen that's not taken in systemically. It acts more locally. So even if you're well beyond the age that would be deemed appropriate to start, menopause hormone therapy, meaning oral or, other types of like patches and other things, you absolutely could qualify for this, in just something to be thinking about. Again, the bone health, many things you have to understand. Remember, bone is a living organ, and it's a living tissue that will respond to different dynamic forces. So there are things to do, but again, it depends on the degree of the severity of the osteoporosis, your current state of health, lots of things to consider, but that, of course, we understand is you're at increased risk. But my one that I really want to highlight right now is cardiovascular risk, right? So when you are before menopause, we have a lower risk heart disease risk, but when we hit post-menopause, our risk becomes elevated or equivalent to men. The number one killer of men and women in the United States is heart disease. So one thing I'd like to highlight is a quick story of my own, is that when I went through this phase, I'm still would be considered perimenopause, because I have, I think, one more month left to be considered menopause, or done with menopause, or entered menopause. So basically, the LDL, my bad cholesterol, went above 100 for the very first time in my entire life. And I was freaked out. And so this is part of the processes that are occurring that increase your risk for cardiovascular disease. So in addition to that, my thyroid went a little wacky, because I've been hypothyroid for many years on appropriate medication, but it's been pretty stable for quite some time. That needed to increase. My everything else was pretty good as far as my numbers, but other women, you may see insulin resistance, you might see some weight gain. Again, all of that builds, increases your risk of inflammation, increasing your risk for heart disease. So really, really want to highlight that. Again, hot flashes may continue with night sweats. They may lessen, but again, some women will suffer decades, and I mean that was multiple decades. So just be aware. If you're still having that, definitely want to maybe speak to your doctor. There are also non-hormonal medications that may help with some of these things. For those of you who choose not to consider, or if it's at a point past where you can't do menopausal hormone therapy, you definitely want to speak to someone about that. Next is weight gain, again, and the muscle mass loss. Remember, we got to move our bodies, and we have to lift things. The muscle is just like the bone. It responds to forces. So lifting heavy weights, if it's safe for you, if you're not osteoporosis, and then again, you want to speak to your doctor about what is appropriate for you. But that is something to consider, is that start with just your body weight, doing something like squats, sitting up and out of the chair. Again, there's so many resources out there, but that would be something you want to be paying attention to. And so, finally, what are some of the things to consider? Well, I think there's a wide variety of things, and the important thing is that each woman understand, number one, this is a discussion that should be happening more often with your physician. And do not let anyone poo-poo your symptoms or your concerns. That is not right. Number two is that you need to have the knowledge and the education about what's going on in your own body. And that is where I come in, and I really want to help women understand what's next. Like, okay, here's these symptoms. This is where I'm at. This is the phase I'm at. You need to understand how to figure out where that is, what you need to do, what are your options, and then really just kind of sit and understand this phase can absolutely be managed, and you can absolutely feel good or even better than you were before. Because if in anything, menopause forces you to look inward and take care of these symptoms, and take care of yourself, maybe for the first time in a very long time, and sometimes ever. And so I have created a free webinar. It's called Master Menopause and Feel Fabulous. The link is below. If you're here on YouTube, also please subscribe to the channel. Share this video with any woman you know. So if you're a man and you've stuck around this long, share this video with someone you know that may be going through perimenopause, menopause, or postmenopause. The webinar is absolutely appropriate for all stages. We can always benefit from learning more. You're going to learn the top 3 mistakes that women make during menopause, and then you're going to learn my 5-step blueprint called Master Menopause and Feel Fabulous. and how you can apply it in your own life. So I hope you enjoy it. The link again is below, and I appreciate all of you as always, and sending you joy, love, peace, and gratitude and healing, because again, we all need that more in our lives, and this world needs it more than ever. So blessings, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.